Hey guys, it's an election season. St. George City elections are the most important thing. We want you to go to votestg.com and find out who's running and what they stand for. See us all over Southern Utah in our voter information booth. We'll be at Digby's Market, Red Rock Bicycles, and the park. We'll see you out there. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the 435 podcast. I got in the running candidate Matt Heaton for St. George City Council. We just wrapped up a great conversation. We talked affordable housing, economic development, but the election's coming up. Primaries are August 15th. Don't forget to get registered to vote. You got to be registered, I think, 10 days before the primary deadline. And then the election is going to be the 21st of November. But if you want more information about Matt and his specific platform, go to matt-heaton.com, and you can also always find the links to all the candidates and the answers to the questions that we talk in depth at votestg.com. We hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you out there. So what I've kind of set up so far, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about what you want to talk about and what you're comfortable with.
Sure.
But I could also just ask you a bunch of questions that you can just feel them as you go. But we've kind of based it off that questionnaire. It's kind of how I've thought through, like, hey, what are important topics to you? What is a quote unquote platform that you're running on? What do you think things need to, what needs to change? Have you listened to any of the podcasts?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think so far?
It's great.
Yeah, really?
I like it. Yeah, it's been really good.
Anything you don't like, or that we could do differently?
I mean, not like off the top of my head, no. But I feel like it's going good. Yeah,
okay,
I've listened to most of the episodes, not all of them, but most of them.
Cool. What was the best one so far?
Well, it depends on what you define as best.
Yeah, or most interesting.
So, I mean, Danielle Larkin was, I think, informative. Mayor Hart had a lot to say.
Yeah. I was really interested. There's a lot of interesting topics that he talked about. That was a good one.
And then, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean Mayor Hart.
Rosenberg?
No, Hurricane.
Oh, Nanette Billings.
Yep. Sorry.
No, yes. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nanette. She that was a good one. That was a good episode too. We just talked about power, because we talked a little bit about power with her, and that's what kind of Danielle Larkin and her first, because I did too with Danielle, but we talked a little bit about energy with Danielle, and then Nanette brought up Lori and how long she's been doing it. So that's kind of why I had Lori come in. But so let's go back to, let's just start in on what is it that's what made you want to start and run for city council? Like, because I think you ran last time.
I did.
Yeah or no?
Yeah. So let me set the record there, because I know a lot of people don't know. And actually I heard in Michelle Tanner's interview, there's a little commentary there about, he declared, but withdrew.
I couldn't even remember where I got that from, but that makes sense.
So I declared 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was battling cancer at the same time.
Right.
And he actually, unexpectedly passed away much quicker than we thought. And it was 5 days after I declared.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just needed to get out and take care of other things.
Yeah. So you had family obligations. And that's the hard thing about, I think, this particular role at city council, is because even though, it's a thankless job. It's an important job, but there's so much that goes into it. And if you have somebody that has a young family, it can be really challenging to have the time and capacity to just do the job at a high level. But running this next time, what really has stimulated your interest in doing it?
So, I just tell everybody at the end of the day, like, my underlying purpose for all of it really is that I want my kids to have an opportunity to live here, work here, play here, mm-hmm. and more importantly, be able to afford all of that, mm-hmm. right? And so that includes having the jobs to pay so that they can live here, and mm-hmm. having the housing that they can actually afford. And I think even today, we have to recognize that, like, our kids, and I say our kids, but like my generation of kids and their kids, mm-hmm. starting lives are going to be much different than ours
Right.
were, right?
Yeah.
My first home was a single family home with a garage and a yard. And I don't think that's going to happen for my kids. I see my kids starting out in a condo, hopefully that they can buy, or maybe a small townhouse.
Right.
But I don't think there's going to be that single, you know what I mean? Like, and not that that's good or bad. It's just that it's different.
Yeah. Needs are different too, right? Like what they're going to want and need to survive, right? Is potentially you don't need a quarter acre lot with a 3-car garage and a 1,700 square foot house.
They may not need that. And that's 100% right. My biggest thing is I just want to make sure that the opportunity is there. Yeah. The supply. Like they need to be able to have something there that they can afford to buy.
Yeah. Well, and we have some constraints though too with the amount of privately owned space that we have in the county, right? And I think only 11% of the county is privately owned. So we have a scarcity in land, we have scarcity in water, we have scarcity in actual dwellings, right? Because we don't really build enough to keep up with population demand, right? Right. Both internally, but mainly externally. People coming from somewhere else to here. Yep. Right. So, what do you think? How do we guide that? Where do you feel like the city's role is in guiding that?
So my opinion on, I guess, the whole affordable housing issue is really, and land in general is, I think that if needed, we need to, well, let me go back and say this. If the city said, hey, here's a section of land or a section of the city that we are going to zone for affordable housing, right? And they say, go, it's zoned. What's next?
Right.
Like what is next?
So you're going to go to a developer, somebody, once the zoning's there, then a developer's going to go in and run the numbers. They're going to do a plat on it. They're going to come up with the engineering, what's the cost to get utilities and the framework set up, curb, gutter, street signs, those things. And then you got to get a builder that goes vertical. So typically it's two separate people that do those developments. Yeah. Right.
Who's going to do that?
Right. It's a good question. It's somebody that says, when I put it down on a piece of paper, I'm going to make money off of it, I think.
Exactly. Right. And so I don't think that can happen affordably. Okay. Right. So there has to be some give, in my opinion, somewhere, whether that be the city saying, not only are we zoning this land, but we are donating this land to affordable housing, or we are, subsidizing whatever, like this land, maybe we owned and now we're going to play ball with a certain developer that we're going to give discounts on. I don't know. I'm just, these are different ways I think that maybe the city could get involved with that. I think the city can also work with itself, the county, the state, and even at a federal level, possibly with grants, right? That come in and say, hey, here's some money that we're going to put specifically at, this money has to go to a specific thing within affordable housing. Yeah. This grant goes to land, this grant goes to structure, that, whatever. So again,
being an advocate for creative solutions around on getting a dwelling that's affordable. One of the thoughts that was brought up to me, Stacy Young, I think we talked about this a little bit, but it might have been on a separate occasion though. When you look at a brand new construction, that's not necessarily the affordable part, right? Like brand new construction is typically at the most expensive that you're really going to get. There's typically a premium there. And I would probably argue it's like that the first resale, because the way I've looked at it is a builder is actually going to come in conservatively on price because they want to move the inventory. They don't want to be sitting on it. So the top market value is somebody that's willing to sit on the market a little bit longer. So it's typically that the first buyer ends up gaining the biggest equity jump. I think the way I've seen the numbers. So if it's a new construction, if that's a high price, what happens? Where does affordability fit? And it's typically the older stuff that's the most affordable stuff, right? Yep. And I think that might be an opportunity where the city can come in and say, okay, hey, here's some older properties that we can creatively come up with a solution. How do we keep those older properties up to date enough to where, you know, you're not feeling like you're getting something you have to put a bunch of money into it, but that you can get it at a lower cost, right? And so looking at the supply chain, you know, a little bit differently might be something to do.
Yeah.
What other as far as affordability and housing, well, jobs, I think transitioning to jobs there too. Where do you feel like the city can impact, you know, jobs and things like that, and encouraging businesses to come in?
Yeah. Well, so we've recently changed structure on economic development within the city staff. I think that's probably a good start to have somebody that is focused specifically on that, on jobs, on bringing, you know, business here. And I also think that it's awesome to bring new business to St. George, but I also think that we really need to stay focused on what we currently have. And yes, we have a lot of small business, and maybe a lot of those don't have plans to grow into, you know, bigger business or whatever, but we also have a really strong talent pool, I believe, coming from the university and over at Innovation Plaza, and maybe even not necessarily at the university, but just people that are actively engaged at Innovation Plaza, right? So if you look at Lehigh, right, I'm not advocating for how they grew.
Very quickly. They grew really fast.
But I am saying that a lot of what happened in Lehigh is homegrown. Yeah, you have Adobe, sure. And you might have a couple other companies that, you know, came in from out of state or whatever. But a lot of those big tech companies are startups from right here in Utah. And I truly believe that we can garner that here in St. George, within our own community, within our own talent pool. And why not market that we want to do that outside of St. George, so that maybe somebody with an idea somewhere else says, man, St. George looks awesome. I'm already kind of starting my business and I want to plant it there. Look at Clint Reed and Zonos, right? Like, the idea was born in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
He started that company in Salt Lake and moved here because he wanted to be here. And now look at Zonos. So, there's a, you know, I mean, a lot of different ways that we can, as a city, can help do that. But I think the city needs to be involved, in whatever ways that they can. And I'll just say this, like, I know that I don't have an answer for, like, a single answer, right, for any of these issues, because I don't think there is one. I think there's 100 different answers, and I think they're out there in the crowd. And that's why I think that, you know, this position needs to be able to listen and understand and take advice and opinions and change their stance if needed, right? Like, it's okay if you have a stance. Yeah. But be okay with changing it if someone's idea or opinion makes more sense than yours.
Okay, so that kind of leads into one of my questions, if you don't mind me interjecting here.
That's why I got you around, Jeff.
Yeah, that's why I'm still here. So one city council person, you know, isn't in control, right? Or isn't doing anything singularly. So I guess my question for you, Matt, is, I mean, what are your thoughts on how the St. George City Council can work better together, or if and when you are elected to the City Council, how can you affect the City Council as a whole to either make change or continue doing good things that we're doing, or change, you know, maybe some bad things that have been done in the past?
Yeah. So, first of all, the city council is not meant to be, nor is it a politicized position, right? So, like,
what do you mean by that?
Meaning,
like you're not running as a
I'm not running as
Republican or a Democrat
as either side, and
right,
and no one is, right. So, to make decisions based on a political belief, even if that belief doesn't match up with what the community and the rest of the council is telling you, I think is wrong, right? But I think that's happening.
Yeah.
I think it's happening. I think it's happened a lot.
Yeah. I think there's two perspectives though, right? There's the you get five members plus a mayor, and they all think the same way. They're all of the same mind, which would mean that there's going to be inertia and momentum moving in a particular direction. And then there's the idea that you would say, hey, we have 5 seats because we want 5 different viewpoints of the way the city as a whole lives, right? There's X percentage of the community that believes in arts and dark sky, right? Like let's pick a couple things that are for sure. There's a belief system here. Is like we want to protect dark skies. We want small, slow growth, right? And we love art, right? And we'll pay. I'll pay for that, right? We'll do a $25 million, community bond. Like they'll participate in that, but they also want dark skies. And then you have somebody who's like, well, I want affordability because I have young kids, and I also I love the dark skies, but I'm also willing to just go up to Pine Mountain because it's 40 minutes away to get that dark sky, right? So do you fall in line with saying, hey, everybody's going to have a different perspective? How do we merge those two thoughts?
Yeah. So I agree with you 100% that a council should not be of a single mindset, first of all.
Okay.
I guess where I was going with that is, there are obviously views all over the map. You have your liberal views, you have your conservative views, you have libertarian views, and that's okay. Those are all okay.
Right.
What I'm saying is if there's an idea or a vote or something, a decision that needs to be made and it makes sense, but it goes against your political beliefs, and you're loud on that political belief, are you going to vote against it because of that? And or are you going to vote for it because it actually makes sense? And in your mind it makes sense, but in your mind it just goes against what you politically think. So I guess that's where I'm going with. It needs to be mixed for sure.
Yeah.
Beliefs, thoughts, ideas. I mean, that's how creativity comes about, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be in a council, a city, or any organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you were to look at how we've managed the function of St. George as a government as a whole, where do you think the biggest gaps are? Where do you think the biggest gaps are? Where are we potentially? Where's there been? Because I don't want to necessarily point out and say, hey, you're doing a bad job at this.
Yeah.
But I would also say, hey, there's a couple things that probably we're not doing a great job on. Where do you identify those things?
So, I mean, in the past, I'm going to say that just, and I don't want this to sound bad against any department or anything like that, because I know that there's more than just a single department that
it's
plays.
Nuanced, and it's what the information you have right now, right?
Yeah.
So, putting a feelings aside, like, hey, no one's trying to hurt
planning
anybody.
and zoning.
Planning and zoning. Okay.
I mean, I've heard it before on another episode, but let's take Little Valley, for example.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but I live in Little Valley. Okay. And,
I call it suburbia hell, everybody, by the way.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best way to describe it, but in my mind, when I drive through there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not how I would want to live my life.
No.
But a lot of people live there, and there's massive houses out there.
Yeah. So, I think that, planning and development and zoning and things, everything needs to be considered especially in, if you're planning greenfield, like you got to have that commercial, locked in and loaded and understand the right type of commercial that needs to be there, because you don't just put in a commercial development and hope that it's going to work. You have to plan that around how far away is the next closest commercial development that would be similar to what we're looking at? And will people go there or come here, or will it be split, right? Can they walk here, bike here, or do they have to drive here? Anyway, that's one example. So I think Little Valley, and I know that Little Valley was planned differently. And there was a lot of pushback, and it happened the way it happened, and it is what it is.
Hey,
let's not do that again.
I heard they're putting a Walmart across the street from the new temple. Is that not true?
Across the street.
That was a joke.
I was like, I'm trying to figure out where, but I don't know.
It goes back to the suburb. I was out in Little Valley yesterday driving around, and Rob, I thought the same thing. I'm like, what? Where am I?
I'm turned around. Luckily, I got Nav and Pine Valley Pine Mountain that I could look. I was like, okay, that's north.
Well,
I was like, that's north. To go that way.
Well, and then I go home to my house in Bloomington. I'm like, oh, I feel so much better.
I know. I'm on the west side. The west side's the best side because you got. It's just. I mean, and this is that balance too. Like the more and more conversations I've had, the more and more I feel the pressure and the understanding of these community members that have lived here a long time or that have just gotten here, right? That are like, we need to preserve this. Let's hold still right here. And, even looking at some of the mistakes of the past, being like, let's not do that mistake and let's just keep it like, whatever's, especially the west side, right? Santa Clara, Ivans, they've had a really tight control over, really slow methodical growth, right? And it's really difficult to progress. And even Santa Clara, over the last really three to 4 years, they've made a huge jump in zonings for medium density. They call it high density. If you're reading on Nextdoor, they call it high density, but it's really medium density. Zonings for townhomes and things like that, which I think is needed. It was in the long 20-year plan. Like, hey, if we're going to have density, this is where we're going to keep it, and that's really where it's followed along. But looking at the 20-year plan, what's your perspective on the 20-year map for St. George?
Well, I mean, so if we're talking about density and planning in general, I just believe that we need to be thinking about mixed use really in everything that we do, and that includes high density.
What do you mean by mixed use?
Commercial, high density, single family, medium density, and parks, and the ability to at least be able to ride your bike to go grab a bag of groceries and come back home if you want, right? From a planning standpoint, I just think we need to be kind of considering all of that in every new greenfield community that goes in. Now, if you're talking about, downtown St. George that's already developed, and they have their new zoning plan for
a lot of room for improvement downtown. Though
it's a draft,
in my opinion.
It's a draft, and so, but there is a lot of room for improvement downtown, and I believe that. I mean, again, back to the affordable. We can build. Downtown St. George may not be a place to put affordable housing, but you can still put more high density, I believe, downtown, and not overcrowd it, but find the right spots for high density, whether that be apartments or nice condos, or mix it up and have some luxurious type stuff that is going to draw that single entrepreneur or business executive that, but then what do we have to have for that? Nightlife.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting, right? Is it, if we're going to be, what are we going to value? I was in a discussion about golf courses with somebody recently, and, their perspective was, it comes down to, what do you value in what you do on a regular basis, right? And if the community values, in this instance, golf, right? I don't want to argue positive or negative, but the story that I've been told, and I think it's accepted, is that the Red Hills Golf Course Red Hills, Red Cliffs, Red
Red
Hills.
Hills. Mhm.
Red Hills Golf Course was started because the community valued golf and they wanted a destination and not be a stop on the way somewhere else, right?
Okay.
They wanted a destination. So if thinking about what do you think the community values now versus what it potentially might value in the future, how do you visualize that, or how do you see that
With
nightlife? Because
more and more people coming in from out of state, I think nightlife is a big deal. I mean, we need to create that experience. A lot of people, I think, think St. George is well, it was, right, and still is, but needs to be this community of like, keep the
riffraff out.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't see it as riffraff. I mean, you can have. I don't know if have you spent time in Boise?
I have not. I spent 10 years in Southern California.
Okay,
definitely riffraff there.
Yeah.
But also lots of stuff to do, right? If in a safe area. And then a lot of times I wasn't in a safe area and I didn't even realize it, right? Like you just don't notice because, certain things, public health and safety sometimes can go unnoticed by a community that isn't active, right? And we're still such a small town. I can see how there's fear around, well, if we look at crime and an increase in crime because of density, right? There's a natural correlation. It's like, well, more humans, more the percent odds of something going wrong, right? But
for sure.
But is there stuff to do in Park City at night, right? Versus is there stuff to do here at night? And is there examples that we can draw from to create that? What does nightlife look like to you?
So nightlife to me, and again, like I'm not a nightlife type of guy. I'm a family guy, but to me, it is being able to, responsibly go from one place to another, maybe 2 or 3 different places if you want.
On a date night, thinking about like on a date night for you and your wife, like you're wearing a jazz hat, like going to a sporting event because it's a night thing to do, right? We don't have that.
Yeah.
We don't have that around here.
No.
So how, what are some things that you think we could attract here that would have families? Because we have the electric theater, we have arts stuff, right? And that's kind of morning stuff, not necessarily. It seems like we have a lot of family activities that are during the day. But what are some things that we could do at night? What have you thought about on that?
I think one thing that we could do in St. George is build a somewhat of a I'll call it an amphitheater, maybe a plaza somewhere that has a stage in the middle, and it's got restaurants surrounding it, and it's connected to a park, right? So you can come and there's a gig going on, and it might be a no-namer, just dude that paid some money because he wanted to show everybody his guitar skills. It might be a cool band that people have heard of, whatever. But you have now restaurants that are surrounding this amphitheater that you're out on the cement patio enjoying music that the other people at the other 3 restaurants are enjoying the same exact music.
Yeah.
And there's maybe a couple of bars in there if someone wants to go get a drink, right? That's one idea. Again, so if nightlife for me and I want to take my wife on a date, I think that would be a great experience. An
environment like that.
Yeah. And I don't want to have to go.
Because if you think of like going to the movie theater, like if you think of like where are we going to go to the movie if we're around here, where a movie theater connected to some shopping that's connected to the restaurants, it's connected to the venue of the thing that we're going to. We don't really have that, right? It doesn't exist here. So where do you visualize that? Like where do you see that even happening? Do we do it down in Desert Color? Is that big shots?
Maybe. Downtown's shot, obviously, right? As far as space,
maybe the Ridge.
Space is limited, right?
Yeah.
But Tech Ridge maybe would be a good spot. Desert Color, potentially. The more central, the better, I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think Tech Ridge could actually be a really good spot for that. And I think the vision there probably affords that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely probably a few, you could do small concepts too that are like that, right? It doesn't have to be this massive thing. It could be a couple of restaurants surrounding that are really kind of well-known, maybe medium to higher end restaurants that have some entertainment value that you can all enjoy. But then you could also have like a bigger version of that somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think that's something too that, as you look down the road, right, we make a 20-year plan and you give a map, right? That's where that planning and zoning comes into play. Yeah. And it can be convoluted and confusing. And if the developers can't see the vision or can't piece the parts together to be able to see that, financially it makes sense to get all of these dominoes to fall down at the same time, I think there's some guidance that are needed from the city council to do that. How do you feel like you would work with let's say two of the three incumbents, because right now there's 3 seats that are opening up. All 3 sitting members are rerunning, so there's no like open seat up.
Right.
Let's say 2 of them stay in. How do you feel like, if you're just looking at the mix, how well do you think you're going to work with the rest of the city council? Have you built relationships with them, or are you coming in from a real fresh perspective? I'm
coming in pretty fresh. So the only city council member that I really honestly even, there's 2 that I know. One of them, I think I have probably a better relationship than the other. And so, the other 3, honestly, I don't know super well. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Coming from the same mind, right? I and this is just my own biased opinion, right? Somebody could disagree with me, but I like having people of different mindsets, looking at problems, right, from as many different angles. And if you get the same echo chamber of viewpoints and the same people or families that are running the town generation after generation, right? We just don't end up moving forward all that much. So I think that's some value there, at least from a fresh perspective, like a truly fresh perspective. So that's interesting. What else? Is there anything else that jumps out to you as far as this campaign goes that you want somebody listening to, to get to know you a little bit better, where your strengths are, or anything like that?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, and I mean, I've put it kind of all over, but like, I'm a regular guy. I'm a family man. My wife and I we just had our 20-year anniversary this year.
Congrats, man. Way to go.
And I have, 3 kids that are ages 9 to 14. And from a, experience standpoint, and just kind of like a pitch on me maybe, is I'm an entrepreneur in this community. I started my business here. I've grown it here. I plan to continue keeping it here. I understand infrastructure very well, and more specifically in the technology side, but I was a very integral part of building redundant fiber networks here in St. George that gives redundancy into the community, and that a while ago didn't exist. There was literally one fiber path into St. George, 20 years ago. And now there's multiple, and I've been a part of kind of bringing a lot of that in and together and figuring it out. And so,
which is a big foundational piece to technology and bringing in jobs, right? Is that's a big thing that huge. Tech companies are going to be looking at, right?
SkyWest Airlines almost left St. George because of that fact, because it got cut. That one path got cut on I-15 one time, got shred up by the scraper they were resurfacing I-15.
Oh, no.
And they wrapped up like a half a mile's worth of fiber. And that put St. George out of internet.
Whoa.
For like 3 days.
Wow.
So at that point, it was, a company like SkyWest has to consider that, right? Like, do we stay here?
Yeah.
Because if that happens again, that's not, sustainable. And so, but that won't happen anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of different routes into St. George now. So,
interesting.
for technology in general and for economic development, that is extremely important for sure.
It is.
I'm on the board of directors for the St. George Chamber of Commerce. And I'm involved in a lot of different just volunteer type community stuff around St. George. And I love to serve the community.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that.
No, that was good. That's good, man. Yeah. I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. I know there's a lot in the field. There's 16. The primaries are coming up August 15th. So, wish you the best of luck. Are you going to go door knocking? Are you going to knock on people's doors and say, "Hey, I'm Matt Heaton. I want you to vote for me in the St. George City"? I asked two others, not on the record, but they're like, I hear the feedback is that people don't like when you knock on their door.
Yeah. I want to say that I've highly considered it.
Okay.
But I don't know yet.
Don't know yet.
So,
all right. Fair enough. Well,
yeah.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, man. It's not an easy job, and I hope to see you back on the program once you get elected in, and we could talk about what you're looking forward to and stuff like that. But that's it for now, man. Have a good rest of your day and good luck.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Okay.